Silence is not absence, it is presence without explanation. I learned that truth on the cycle our outermost sensors went blind, not with static, not with failure, but with nothing. I am Zael Tor, High Archivist of the Galactic Concord, sworn keeper of recorded reality. For 12,000 rotations, my kind has believed the universe to be loud. Stars scream in radiation, nebulae whisper in charged dust. Even the void hums faintly with background noise left behind by creation itself. Silence, true silence, does not occur naturally. Yet beyond the rim, the final boundary of mapped space, there it was, a wound in the cosmos, perfectly clean, perfectly still. At first, we assumed error. Instruments were recalibrated, sensor arrays realigned, observation drones dispatched and lost. The silence remained, unmoving, patient. It did not expand, it did not retreat, it simply waited. The Concord is built on cataloging. We record species before we greet them, conflicts before they ignite, extinctions before they are complete. Knowledge, we believe, prevents surprise, and surprise, we believe, is the only true enemy of empire. I once taught initiates that nothing unknown survives long enough to remain unknown. I was wrong. As the days passed, unease spread through the archivums. Junior recorders spoke in hushed tones. Admirals requested data that did not exist. Priests of the stellar continuum claimed the silence resembled pre-creation myths, space before light learned how to burn. I dismissed them. Faith fills gaps knowledge has not yet reached. Then the beacons awoken. They were not ours. They predated the Concord, predated even our oldest ruins. Relics found buried in dead systems, dismissed as ceremonial markers of forgotten migrations. No power source, no activation logic. We cataloged them as inert curiosities, symbols without function, until every one of them lit simultaneously. Across hundreds of sectors, ancient constructs flared to life, emitting a single shared signal, not a warning, not a greeting, a record. I felt something tighten in my thorax then, a reflex older than reason. The beacons were not reacting to the silence, they were responding to what had caused it. Emergency council was convened within the hour. I stood beneath the great holodome as star maps shifted, redrawing themselves around that impossible void. The silence was no longer static, it had edges now, precise boundaries where stellar noise ended as if cut by design. An anomaly, one counselor said, voice brittle. A weapons test, suggested another. No, I said, before protocol could stop me. Weapons leave residue. My interruption earned me stares. Archivists are meant to observe, not interpret, but interpretation is all we had left. I reviewed the oldest records that cycle, accounts from precursor civilizations long erased, speaking of travelers who did not announce themselves, of paths carved through space not by force, but by intent.
Of entities that did not colonize, did not negotiate, did not worship, only moved forward. Most historians dismiss these as metaphor. The silence pulsed, not outward, inward, as if something within it had changed direction. Long-range sensors registered a distortion then, not energy, not mass, but alignment, space itself adjusting, a corridor forming where none should exist. The rim boundary, sacred and inviolate, was crossed without breach, without resistance. No alarm sounded, no defenses triggered. There was nothing to target, only the silence, thinning. I remember thinking, absurdly, that whatever came next must be ancient, careful, slow, that only something patient enough to erase noise from the universe would emerge with ceremony. Instead, the silence collapsed. It folded inward, like breath drawn before speech, and vanished entirely. Stars resumed their screaming. Background radiation returned. The universe pretended nothing had happened. Except our instruments now showed something impossible. A trajectory. Clean, linear, deliberate. Something had passed through the rim and left no trace of propulsion, no signature of transit, no wake, no distortion. Just a line, etched into our data like a scar we could not see with our eyes. It didn't arrive, an analyst whispered. I felt the full weight of our arrogance then. all our catalogs, all our certainty. We had mistaken familiarity for mastery. The universe had simply allowed us to believe we were alone, until now. I authorized the final record of that cycle with trembling appendages. Unidentified presence confirmed. Origin, beyond mapped reality. Intent, unknown. Behavior, purposeful. As the council argued, as fleets scrambled, and philosophers panicked, I stared at the projected line stretching deeper into Concord space. Whatever had crossed the rim did not come in search of us. It was already on its way somewhere else, and we were merely in the path. The first scream in the council chamber did not come from fear. It came from numbers. Tacticians shouted, mandibles flaring as holodisplays flooded the air. Recalculating. No, that's impossible. I stood at my assigned archivist dais, watching stars blur across the tactical projection. The object, no, the vessel, had emerged fully from the silence, and now carved a razor-straight path through restricted Concord space. Sector after sector fell behind it, each boundary crossed without deceleration, without clearance, without acknowledgement. It did not jump. It did not fold space. It simply went faster. Our physics councils have long agreed that acceleration beyond certain thresholds liquefies crews, fractures hulls, tears causality itself into incoherence. Every known species respects these limits, not out of obedience, but survival. Yet the readings climbed calmly past redline markers, past theoretical maxima, past values annotated in our databases as fatal assumptions.
"Structural integrity should have failed 3 sectors ago," an engineer whispered. The chamber filled with overlapping commands, defensive nets activated, patrol fleets altered vectors, interdiction fields warmed to lethal charge. Through it all, the vessel continued on its course, unbothered, unhurried, adjusting its trajectory by fractions so small they bordered on prescience. That was when the fear truly took hold. "Track deviation," a navigation officer said slowly. A pause followed, then another voice, quieter. The implication settled over us like cosmic dust. The vessel was not reacting to our movements, it was anticipating them. I accessed the full archival spectrum, every known hull design, every extinct civilization's engineering style, every forbidden weapons platform buried under sealed clearance. Nothing matched. The ship's silhouette was wrong, too smooth where it should have bristled with emitters, too simple where intimidation demanded excess. No radiance of exotic drives, no distortion halos. It looked almost unfinished. Or perhaps refined. We hailed it. Once. Twice. In all known diplomatic frequencies, from ritual greeting pulses to emergency threat codes, we transmitted mathematical constants, cultural identifiers, even fragments of ancient precursor languages thought universal. There was no response. No acknowledgement. No rejection. It did not slow. Instead, its velocity increased by another impossible margin, and the distance to the inner systems collapsed alarmingly fast. "This is a war declaration," a counselor declared, slamming a limb against the dais. "No," another corrected, dread creeping into their tone. "Our doctrines are built on ceremony. Even war begins with declarations, with rituals of escalation that allow empires to save face while preparing slaughter. This vessel observed none of it. It behaved not like a challenger, but like a traveler passing through inconvenient terrain." I felt something ancient stir within me then, a memory not my own, but encoded into the oldest instincts of our species. The understanding that prey feels when it realizes the predator did not bother to hide. "What is the target?" the High Admiral demanded. A strategist hesitated before answering. "The capital lay." The chamber erupted. That was impossible. The capital lay buried beneath layers of restricted corridors, surrounded by defense grids capable of sterilizing entire star clusters. No hostile force had ever reached its outer perimeter. Even rebellions died far from its light. Yet the projected line did not waver. We deployed the first wall fleet. Thousands of warships, ceremonial in formation, their hulls edged with centuries of conquest, surged to intercept. From the holodisplay, it looked like a tidal wave rising to meet a single grain of sand. I waited for the collision. It never came. At the final approach vector, the vessel shifted, barely perceptible,
and slipped through the fleet formation without contact. Not by chance, by design.
It threaded gaps too narrow for standard navigation tolerances, passing so close that sensor ghosts flickered across our displays. Several captains reported system anomalies as it passed: temporary blackouts, data dysynchronization, timestamps misaligning by fractions of a second. It was not attacking. It was measuring. Someone asked, their voice cracking. The High Admiral did not answer immediately. To fire was to admit threat. To hesitate was to admit helplessness. The fleet's weapons remained charged, glowing silently against the void. The vessel did not acknowledge them. It continued inward. As it approached the capital system, something unprecedented occurred. It decelerated. Not gradually, not with the flare of reverse thrust. It simply stopped accelerating. Velocity bled away as if the concept itself had been dismissed. In less than a standard cycle, the ship went from impossible speed to absolute stillness, directly above the capital world. No orbit, no drift, just there, motionless, watching. Every defense platform locked on instantly. Targeting reticles overlapped until the vessel was buried beneath layers of lethal intent. One command, one impulse, and the sky above our homeworld would burn. Yet no one gave the order, because for the first time since it had appeared, the ship did something new. It turned. Not physically, its orientation shifted, aligning its forward axis toward the planet below, toward us. A single transmission finally arrived. Not words, not images. A simple data packet, unencrypted. Coordinates, timestamps, stellar positions, accurate beyond our own charts. It was a map, not of where it had been, but of where it was going. And at the center of that projected route, highlighted with calm inevitability, was our capital system, marked not as a target, but as a waypoint. They're not invading, I realized aloud, the truth chilling me more than any threat. The High Admiral stared at the hovering ship, weapons trembling on standby. As if an answer, a second data pulse followed. 3 symbols, translated automatically by our systems without error. Observe. Decide. The vessel remained motionless above our world, fleets frozen around it, weapons hot, hearts racing. And in that terrible stillness, I understood the depth of our peril. Whatever these beings were, whatever humans might be, they were giving us time, not out of mercy, but because the outcome, to them, was already decided. First contact is supposed to be ceremonial. I have studied thousands of such moments, carefully preserved recordings, where 2 civilizations meet at the edge of ignorance and pretend, briefly, that equality exists. There are gestures, titles spoken with reverence, protocols layered atop fear to disguise it as dignity. None of that survived the moment we spoke to the humans. The vessel still hung above our capital world, unmoving, its shadow a quiet wound across orbital space. Defense grids tracked it relentlessly, millions of firing solutions recalculating every breath. One order would end the standoff in annihilation or humiliation. No one could say which. Against instinct, against history, against terror, the Empire chose to speak. I stood among the translation adepts as the transmission was prepared. Layers of diplomatic encoding wrapped around a simple greeting, heavy with implication. You are seen, you are known, you are expected to behave. The signal crossed the void in less than a heartbeat. The response was immediate. Not processed, not translated, immediate. Our system struggled for several seconds, not because the language was complex, but because it was simple, brutally so. No nested meanings, no ritual metaphors, no ambiguity buffers to soften offense. The translator chimed, uncertain. Message decoded, it announced. I felt my carapace tighten as the words rendered across the hollow field. No empire,
No fleet designation, no claim of supremacy. Just that. Another pulse followed. Apologies for unauthorized transit. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Unauthorized transit, as if crossing the most sacred border of known space were a minor procedural error. Then came the request. Provide navigational data for regions beyond your territory. I stared at the projection, my thoughts scrambling. This was not conquest language, nor was it supplication. It was transactional, as if we were an inconvenience, not an obstacle. The council deliberated in frantic silence. To share charts was unthinkable. Our borders were not merely lines, they were leverage, power, identity. Knowledge was control. The denial was swift and formal, wrapped in the full weight of Concord authority. A warning was added, citing sovereignty violations and consequences. The human response took longer this time. 3 seconds. 5. For the first time since their arrival, uncertainty flickered through the chamber. When the reply came, it was shorter. I exhaled, not realizing I had been holding my breath. Then the tone changed. Not in volume, not in aggression, in temperature. My translator hesitated, then continued. A chill crept through my neural spines. Contingency planning was a military phrase, cold, calculated, final. The humans continued, unhurried. Clarification, our objective is not occupation. Several counselors straightened, relief flagging briefly. That relief died with the next line. However, our expansion trajectory requires passage. Statistically probable. Not morally debated. Not politically weighed. Calculated. I understood then. The humans had not come to conquer us. They had come to go through us. An envoy was dispatched, one of our most imposing diplomats, adorned in symbols of ancient victories. He spoke with practiced authority, threatening sanctions, retaliation, war. He cited fleet tonnage, superweapons, the weight of history. The humans listened.
When they responded, there was something new in their words. Disappointment. Your defensive posture is inefficient, the translator rendered. Escalation benefits neither party. Recommend. As if advising a colleague. The envoy scoffed, issuing a final ultimatum. Weapons platforms around the capital flared brighter, power levels rising. The human vessel did not move. Instead, something invisible passed through space. I felt it before the alarm sounded, a pressure, like reality briefly forgetting its shape. Then the defense grid began to fail. Not explode, not overload. Fail. One by one, orbital platforms went dark, weapon capacitors drained to zero, targeting systems reset into diagnostic loops they could not escape. Entire layers of our planetary shield flickered and vanished, leaving bare atmosphere exposed to the void. No energy spike registered, no weapon discharge detected. They had reached into our systems and turned them off. In seconds, panic erupted. Engineers shouted over one another, desperately attempting reboots. Admirals screamed orders that could not be carried out. The capital world lay naked beneath the silent human ship. Then came the final message. I felt something break inside me then. Not fear, but certainty. The certainty that every assumption underpinning our dominance was obsolete. This action was non-lethal by design, the humans continued. A pause. Prefer. The defense grid remained offline. The balance of power did not tip. It collapsed. I looked around the chamber at leaders who had never known helplessness, their postures sagging beneath the realization that survival now depended not on strength, but on the restraint of strangers. First contact, I realized too late, was never about greetings. It was about learning who holds the future. And in that moment, as the human vessel waited patiently above our world, I understood the terrible truth. We had not met equals. We had met a species already prepared for our refusal. We never issued a declaration of war. That truth still unsettles me more than the destruction that followed. Empires are meant to announce violence, to justify it, to dress slaughter in language that pretends inevitability is righteousness. Yet when the first human fleets arrived, there were no proclamations, only motion. They came in waves, not the ceremonial armadas we deploy, arranged in symmetrical formations meant to intimidate as much as destroy. The human ships emerged in irregular clusters, modular constructs that seemed unfinished until they began to change. Whole segments shifted mid-flight, external structures detached, reconfigured, locked back into place with new purpose. A vessel that resembled a carrier moments ago unfolded into something bristling with weapons, while others shed armor to gain speed. Our analysts struggled to classify them.
multiple ship classes sharing identical cores, one reported in disbelief.
The first engagement occurred at the Karos Gate, a choke point fortified by 3 Concord battle groups. We expected a test, a probing strike, something restrained. Instead, the humans committed fully. They did not hesitate at the sight of our numbers. They did not slow to posture. They accelerated straight into the killing zone, accepting losses without pause. Several of their forward ships disintegrated under our opening salvo, clean hits, catastrophic damage. They did not retreat. They advanced through the wreckage. I watched the battle unfold from the archival nexus, feeds pouring in from 1,000 angles. Human ships maneuvered with reckless precision, slipping between firing arcs too tight for our doctrines to anticipate. When one was crippled, nearby vessels adjusted instantly, covering it without command signals, as if guided by shared instinct. Then something happened that shattered our tactical assumptions. A human ship, its hull breached, engines failing, altered course toward a civilian habitat ring caught between the fleets. Our weapons fire had stabilized its orbit. Evacuation was incomplete. The human vessel moved to intercept. A commander shouted. The ship did not fire weapons. It did not attempt repairs. It rammed the habitat ring's trajectory, expending its remaining mass and momentum to correct the orbit. The impact tore the vessel apart, scattering debris harmlessly into space. The habitat stabilized. Millions of non-combatants lived. The humans did not acknowledge the loss. They closed ranks and pressed forward. Confusion rippled through our fleets. Rescue operations under active fire violated every principle of rational warfare. Self-destruction for non-strategic assets was considered pathological behavior. Yet the humans repeated it. I saw medships dart into crossfire zones, shields flaring as they extracted wounded crews. I saw escorts deliberately interpose themselves between enemy fire and evacuation craft, absorbing impacts until nothing remained but expanding vapor. They fought as if death were accounted for, not glorified, not feared, expected. Our admirals attempted countermeasures, adaptive targeting algorithms, new formation patterns, electronic warfare suites designed to scramble human coordination. It worked. For minutes. Then the humans adjusted. They altered frequencies, tactics, even engagement philosophies in real time. Where we relied on pre-approved doctrine, they improvised. Where we followed chains of command, they acted autonomously, trusting subordinates to make lethal decisions without delay. The war spread with terrifying speed. Systems fell not because they were overwhelmed, but because they were outpaced. Human fleets bypassed strongholds entirely, striking logistics hubs, communication relays, shipyards. They moved like water, flowing around resistance, eroding foundations. In one system, a Concord dreadnought unleashed a superweapon capable of sterilizing a planet.
The humans responded not by destroying it, but by disabling its targeting arrays remotely, then boarding it under fire. The boarding party suffered near total casualties. They succeeded anyway. The dreadnought drifted powerless, its weapons silent. I remember gripping the edge of my console, my limbs trembling. Every species I knew fought to preserve itself above all else. Survival was the highest law, encoded into biology and belief. Humans broke that law. They treated survival as a resource, valuable but spendable. This was not madness. It was strategy born of something we lacked. Numbers replenished by rapid reproduction, societies accustomed to loss, histories scarred by near-extinction events they had survived. Where we feared annihilation, they assumed it as a possibility and planned beyond it. Reports flooded in from across the Concord. Human ships detonating themselves to destroy fortified positions. Human engineers repairing vessels mid-battle with exposed hulls. Human soldiers holding corridors alone so others could withdraw. Every casualty report ended the same way. Objective achieved. The psychological toll on our forces was catastrophic. Pilots hesitated to fire, unnerved by enemies who advanced into obvious death traps. Commanders delayed decisions, waiting for human reactions that never followed predictable patterns. Doctrine became obsolete overnight. I began to understand the humans' earlier words. Contingency planning accounted for this outcome. They had prepared for war long before we believed it possible. As days turned into cycles, the Concord's defensive perimeter fractured. Entire sectors went dark, not destroyed, but abandoned as fleets redeployed too slowly, always arriving moments after the humans had moved on. And still no declaration came, no ultimatum, no demand for surrender,
only relentless forward motion. In the archives, I found myself recording not victories or losses, but patterns, human adaptability curves, response times, behavioral constants, and beneath it all, one unifying trait: resolve. Not rage, not hatred. Resolve. They fought not because they desired war, but because once engaged, they refused to stop until the path ahead was clear. The realization struck me during the fall of the Ilvaris line, our last impregnable barrier before the core. A human commander broadcast a single message to our defenders: withdraw civilians. Some obeyed, many could not. When the line fell, human forces diverted resources to humanitarian corridors while still advancing. I stared at the data in numb disbelief. They were not conquering us, they were outlasting us. As the Concord reeled, as worlds burned and doctrines crumbled, I finally named the horror we faced. We were not at war with a species that sought victory. We were at war with a species that had already accepted loss and chosen to move forward anyway.
And if that was how they fought when merely passing through, I feared what would happen if they ever decided to stay. We captured the human by accident. Her vessel had been crippled during the retreat from the Draxel corridor, its engines failing just long enough for our interdiction nets to close. Even then, the boarding action cost us more lives than anticipated. Human resistance was brief but precise. Targeted strikes meant to delay, not destroy. When the smoke cleared, she stood alone amid the wreckage, weapon discarded, posture straight. She did not beg. She did not snarl. She simply raised her hands and said something our translator struggled with at first, not because it was complex, but because it carried no fear. "I'm done fighting," she said. I was summoned to observe the interrogation due to my growing familiarity with human linguistic patterns. The chamber was sealed, shielded, saturated with suppression fields. The human officer sat restrained at the center, smaller than I expected, fragile even. Her skin bore fresh wounds, one arm bound in a splint of emergency polymer. She was smiling, not broadly, not mockingly, softly, as if amused by an unspoken thought. "You are an officer," the interrogator began. She tilted her head, studying us with open curiosity. "Commander Eliza Reyes," she replied. "Exploration Corps." "Formerly." The interrogator pressed harder, issuing threats, listing the consequences of non-compliance: pain, isolation, execution. Each word was chosen to erode resistance. Her smile did not fade. When the first pain stimulus was applied, her breath caught, but she did not scream. Instead, she laughed once, quietly, then apologized. "Sorry," she said. I felt unease ripple through my neural cluster. Pain is universal. Response to it is not. "Why?" I asked, breaking protocol. Her eyes found mine instantly, not hostile, not defiant. "Because." The interrogator paused, irritated. I gestured for continuation. "We demanded strategic beta, fleet locations, command structures." She answered selectively, never lying but never giving what mattered. When confronted with evidence of human losses, projected casualty numbers designed to break morale, she grew somber, but not afraid. "You expect us to fear extinction," she said quietly. I asked her then about Earth. The name carried weight in our archives, classified as a high-gravity death world, biologically hostile, geologically unstable, a place where survival should have been improbable. Her eyes lit with something like fondness. "Earth tried to kill us every day," she said. "Storms, plagues, ice ages, asteroids, predators. Each time we adapted or we died." She spoke of mass extinctions not as tragedies but teachers, of civilizations rising and collapsing, of mistakes carved into memory, of cooperation not as virtue but necessity. "We didn't survive because we were strongest," she said. The interrogator scoffed. Her smile returned, smaller, sadder. "We don't sacrifice without reason," she corrected. That struck deeper than any weapon. She explained it simply then, as if speaking to a child. "To you, survival is the goal. To us, it's the starting point. Living without growing, without moving forward." I felt the words settle into me like poison and medicine both. The interrogator escalated, threatening her world, her people. When he mentioned earth burning, something flickered across her face. Not fear, anger, but it cooled almost instantly. Silence followed. "You haven't," she continued, "because you're still trying to understand us." I leaned closer. "Then help us understand." She met my gaze fully now. "We didn't start it," she said, "but we can't stop halfway." I asked, She hesitated for the first time. "Forward," she said, finally. The interrogator threatened her life one last time, demanding capitulation codes. He raised the execution signal. She smiled again, not bravely, proudly. "You think dying scares us," she said. "It doesn't." The signal was never given, not because of mercy, but because no one in the chamber could say with certainty that killing her would change anything. As guards escorted her away, she turned once more toward me. I watched the door seal behind her, my thoughts spiraling. Humans were not fearless, they were directed. Their courage was not madness, it was momentum given purpose, a species shaped by chaos, refined by loss, and unafraid to pay the price of progress. That night, as I updated the archives, I realized something that chilled me far more than human weapons ever could. We were not fighting monsters. We were fighting survivors who believed the future belonged to those willing to risk everything to reach it. And I feared what they might become if pushed further. Until that cycle, I believed the humans were unbreakable. Not invulnerable. We had destroyed their ships, killed their soldiers, but unbreakable in the way forces of nature are unbroken by resistance. They absorbed loss, adapted, and continued forward. Every defeat sharpened them, every sacrifice fed their momentum. Then they bled. The system was insignificant by Concord standards, a fringe colony of the Talaran, a minor species we had long categorized as non-essential. Sparse population, limited resources. When our fleets withdrew from the sector to consolidate defenses, we did not evacuate them. Doctrine labeled it acceptable attrition. The humans arrived 3 cycles later, not to conquer, not to extract, to defend. Their task force was small by their standards: escort-class warships, logistics vessels, medical carriers. Enough to deter raiders, not enough to face what followed. A Concord purge fleet, acting independently and without central authorization, engaged them. I watched the battle unfold in horrified silence as human ships formed a defensive shell around the colony world, interposing themselves again and again between incoming fire and civilian habitats.
They held far longer than projections allowed. Then the line broke. A cascade failure rippled through their formation. One ship detonated, triggering secondary explosions. Another lost shields and burned from stern to bow. Human distress calls flooded the bands. Not cries of panic, but coordinates, instructions, requests for aid they knew would not arrive. Within minutes, the task force was gone, annihilated. The colony survived, barely. When confirmation reached the Concord, some celebrated quietly. Proof, they said, that humans could be punished, that they were not gods. I felt no triumph, because what followed was worse. The humans did not hide their dead. They broadcast them. Across open channels, unencrypted, impossible to ignore, images filled our networks. Faces of the fallen, voices recorded before deployment, names spoken aloud, not as statistics, but as people. This was Lieutenant Mara Chen, a human voice said. This was Engineer Pavel Orlov. This was Dr. Amina Salis. The broadcasts did not accuse us. They remembered. Entire planets watched as humans mourned openly, memorials held in vacuum, ships aligned in silence, engines dark. I expected rage to follow, a declaration, a threat. Instead, they grieved. For one full rotation, human fleets ceased all offensive operations. And in that stillness, something terrifying took shape. Unity. When the humans returned, they did not come screaming vengeance. They came organized. Their fleets were larger now, not newly reinforced, but transformed. Ship designs bore marks of adaptation clearly inspired by the battle we had just fought. Shield harmonics adjusted to our weapons, countermeasures refined, tactics rewritten. They had learned. But it was their demeanor that chilled me. The anger was there, but focused, disciplined, bound together by shared loss. Human commanders spoke openly across channels, addressing not just their own forces, but the galaxy. We will not abandon those who cannot defend themselves, one said. Moved, not destroyed, not punished, removed. The next engagements were unlike anything before. Where once humans had pressed forward relentlessly, Now they advanced with precision, bordering on inevitability. They protected evacuation corridors for alien civilians, even those loyal to the Concord. They deployed rescue operations after battles, retrieving wounded from both sides. But when resistance threatened non-combatants, they were merciless. Entire Concord squadrons vanished in coordinated strikes so efficient they felt surgical. No wasted motion, no spectacle, just results. I realized then that killing humans did not weaken them, it clarified them. Their grief was not paralysis, it was fuel. Their mourning did not look backward, it aligned them forward, sharpening purpose until doubt burned away. One transmission, replayed endlessly across our networks, remains etched into my memory. A human child, standing beside a holographic wall of names.
"My mother died so other people could live," the child said, voice steady. I could not watch further. The Concord began to fracture soon after. Some systems surrendered outright, others defected, requesting human protection, not out of fear, but because humans showed up when the Concord did not. That truth spread faster than any fleet. I amended the archives again, my hands unsteady. Human behavioral constant revised. Loss does not deter. Loss unifies. As reports poured in of human forces reclaiming ground we believed secure, I understood the mistake we had made. We thought blood would teach them caution. Instead, it taught them resolve. And as their fleets advanced once more, stronger, angrier, bound together by shared sacrifice, I feared what lesson they would teach us next. Because the humans had finished mourning, and the galaxy was about to witness what came after. The superweapon was never meant to be used. That is the lie empires tell themselves when they build something unforgivable. We called it the Terminus Array, a lattice of stellar siphons hidden within dead systems, designed to collapse stars into controlled singularities. Fired in sequence, it would unmake entire regions of space, leaving nothing for fleets to pass through, a final wall, a scorched void. If we could not stop the humans, we would erase the path they intended to take. Doctrine named it deterrence. History would have named it extinction. I was present in the sealed chamber when activation protocols were debated. The Concord was broken by then, fleets shattered, systems defecting, confidence eroded beyond repair. Leaders who once argued over ceremonial precedents now spoke in whispers. "This ends the war," one counselor said, trembling. And another asked. Silence followed. Acceptable attrition had grown very large indeed. Authorization codes were prepared. Priests recited absolutions meant for civilizations, not souls. I felt hollow as the final sequence cued, a cascade of inevitability waiting only for consensus. We never reached it, because the humans spoke first. They did not strike the array, did not sabotage its cores, did not assassinate those who built it. They found it and sent us the schematics. Every hidden node, every failsafe, every contingency, laid bare. Panic erupted. They're bluffing. The follow-up ended the debate. Live telemetry, internal camera feeds, human reconnaissance teams standing inside a Terminus control vault, their weapons lowered, their posture calm. They could have destroyed it with a thought. Instead, they waited. Then came the message that ended the war.
The human envoy appeared moments later, transmitted directly into the chamber. No towering avatar, no symbols of dominance, just a single figure, unarmored, eyes tired. "We could stop you," the envoy said. Murmurs rippled. Fear, confusion, suspicion. Demanded the High Admiral. The envoy inhaled slowly. "Because if you use that weapon, you become what you are afraid we are." The logic was brutal in its clarity. "You have a choice," the human continued. "Deactivate the array, stand down your remaining forces." The word echoed through the chamber like a heresy. Alliance implied parity, mutual obligation, shared future. A counselor spat. The envoy's gaze hardened, not with anger, but resolve. "No," they said. "Surrender is enforced." A data stream followed, terms laid out with meticulous precision. Shared defense corridors, joint exploration accords, human assistance in rebuilding worlds damaged by the war. non-interference clauses protecting Concord autonomy. No tribute, no occupation, no imposed governance. I felt my mind reel. You could erase us, I said, unable to remain silent. The envoy looked directly at me. Yes, they said. The admission carried no pride. That's why this matters, they continued. Power without restraint ends everything. Ethics. The word sounded fragile compared to singularities and fleets, yet it terrified us more than annihilation ever could. Because annihilation is simple. It ends fear. Restraint demands trust. The chamber fractured into argument. Some called it deception. Others clung to the super weapon like a final prayer. But beneath it all lay a truth no one could deny. If humans wanted us gone, we would already be gone. At last, the high voice of the Concord rose, ancient, weary, stripped of certainty. The human envoy paused. Partners, they said. The envoy's expression did not change. That was the moment the war truly ended. Not with victory, not with defeat, with a decision. The activation codes were never entered. One by one, the siphons powered down, stars released from their doomed futures. I felt something inside me loosen, a knot tied since the silence beyond the rim first appeared. The human envoy inclined their head. You chose wisely, they said. As the transmission ended, I looked around the chamber at beings who had ruled unquestioned for millennia and saw them diminished, humbled, alive. Strength guided by ethics. That was the human weapon we had never prepared for. And as I recorded the final entry of the war into the archives, a realization settled over me with equal parts dread and awe. The humans had not defeated us. They had survived us. And now, bound by choice rather than force, we would have to learn what it meant to stand beside a species that could destroy us, but chose, every day, not to. Years have passed since the war ended. The archives are quieter now, not because the galaxy has grown safer, but because it has grown honest.
I sit alone within the grand record vault, surrounded by histories once written in the certainty of dominance. Many of those volumes have been sealed, reclassified, or quietly removed. One entry remains open before me. Species designation, human. Once, that title was followed by threat assessments, escalation trees, extinction probabilities. I authored many of those lines myself, my hand steady, my convictions absolute. I delete them. In their place, I write something no archivist before me would have dared. Status. Constant. Humans did not replace the Concord. They did not rule. They did not demand monuments or oaths. Instead, they became something far more unsettling and far more reliable. They arrive where collapse threatens. They stay where others withdraw. They leave only when forward motion demands it. Human patrols now guard trade routes once abandoned as unprofitable. Human engineers rebuild worlds the Concord wrote off as losses. Their fleets move continuously, not to conquer, but to connect. Corridors once defined by fear are now measured by response times, how fast humans will arrive when someone calls for help. They do not always succeed. They do not always survive. And yet, they continue. My fear of them has not vanished. I do not believe it ever will. A species capable of such adaptation, such sacrifice, such restraint, should never be met without caution. But fear alone is incomplete. It must be balanced by understanding. I have watched humans mourn and rebuild. I have seen them argue fiercely among themselves, fracture politically, stumble morally, and then correct course with painful effort. Their chaos is real. Their conscience is not ornamental. They choose it. That is what makes them dangerous. Not their weapons, not their fleets, not even their willingness to die, but their refusal to stop believing the future can be better than the past. A junior archivist once asked me why humans are recorded as legends now, not myths. Because myths are safe, I told them. The final archival note is not a warning. It is a reminder. Do not mistake humanity's restraint for weakness. Do not mistake their kindness for hesitation. Do not mistake their hope for naivete. They are dangerous because they endure, because they adapt, because when faced with extinction, they do not ask whether survival is worth the cost. They ask what kind of future is worth surviving for. I close the record and seal it with my crest. Outside the vault, human ships pass through Concord space without escort now. their presence no longer an anomaly, just part of the rhythm of the galaxy. Once the silence beyond the rim terrified us. Now, when I think of what lies beyond known space, I wonder what humans will find there, and what they will choose to become next. That uncertainty still frightens me, but it also gives me hope. And for the first time in the long history of the Galactic Concord, hope feels like a risk worth taking.